Hello, Crown family. This is Bill Kuhn, coming to you from my backyard. Actually, it just seemed like if we're going to record this video today, when we've got some sunshine, we should do it outside. So we're outside, and I hope that you're getting the opportunity to be outside as well. As we have thought what would be best for us as a community in the coming weeks, we thought that maybe it would be good for us to look at passages of scriptures together. And where we decided to land was in the book of Psalms. When I was young and started reading the Bible, I really didn't care for the book of Psalms. It seemed kind of distant. But as I've grown older, I've learned to appreciate it much more. It's a book that includes all of the human experiences, right? It's a book has passages on anger and disappointment, and passages on depression and anxiety, but also passages on joy and gladness and salvation and deliverance. And so it captures all of the human experiences. And I think for many of us, as we go through this, new experience with this COVID-19 reality, there are all kind of emotions around it. And so it seemed good to us that we would spend some time in the Psalms together. And so on Wednesdays, we're going to journey through the Psalms. And today I get the privilege of kind of introducing this series to us and getting us launched. And as I was thinking about this, the passage that has been on my mind over the last couple weeks from the book of Psalms is really Psalm 46. And there's really a popular verse later in the psalm that many of us know, and it's in songs, but we don't maybe know all the context. What's interesting about the psalm is if you do some research that we don't really know much about the immediate context of the psalm other than what we can glean from the words in the psalm. And what we find in the psalm are things about fear, about mountains quaking and nations being in turmoil. It's definitely a psalm of conflict. And yet in the midst of it, we read words like this. The psalm opens with these words: God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. What a great message for us today, that God is our ever-present help in times of trouble. In fact, 3 times in this passage, it tells us that God is with us. Later in the psalm, it says, "The Lord God is with us." And then the last verse of the psalm says, "The Lord God is with us." Again, 3 times we read that God is with us, ever-present God. It reminds me of a time when I was in 8th grade. Much of 8th grade I have forgotten. Thankfully, I have forgotten. But there is one teacher that stuck out to me in 8th grade. His name was Mr. Summers. Don't remember much of what Mr. Summers taught, really, but he was such a great, engaging teacher. He would come into the classroom with his acoustic guitar, and he would sing out our spelling words for that week. But one of the things he would do, he did this several times. He would come in and he'd say, I had a dream last night. And in my dream, students were taking a test, and as they were taking the test, they'd look onto other people's tests, and as they did so, their eyes would be aflame and they would burn, and he would set this mood, and then he'd hand out the exam, right? And then as we were taking the exam, he would leave the room, and it was just this odd sense, like the teacher has left the space, and now the students are in control, and we'd all look at each other like, wow, this is really odd. In the middle of an exam, there's no teacher here. And then over the intercom system, our teacher would say, "Are your eyes burning?" He would reference his dream or whatever, or he'd give us the answer to some exam question or something. But it was just always interesting to have a classroom with no teacher present. I read this psalm and I realize that there's never a moment where there's not a God in the universe. There's never a moment when he's left the classroom or he's left the students to themselves. He is always there with us. Interesting, by the way, a follow-up to Mr. Summers. Years later, I was meeting with him, and I asked him about those times when he would say things over the intercom to our classes. He said, yeah, he was reprimanded for that because at the time he didn't know how to isolate our classroom. And so he would run into the main office and in a hurry grab the microphone and say these words to our class, but he would say them to every student in the building. Every class would hear him say things like this. So What a great, engaging professor or teacher he was. But God has never left the universe. There's never a moment when he's not available to help us in our time of need. But I don't always sense that. I don't have a sense that God is always with me. Do you have moments like that in life where you kind of look around at the tumultuous days or the conflict in your life or the trials of life and go, where is God? Why don't I sense him? I believe he's with me according to the scriptures. He never leaves us nor forsakes us. Matthew chapter 28, where Jesus says, I'm with you always to the end of the age. I know those truths, but I don't always perceive that God is with us or with me. Well, the Psalm 46, again, maybe gives us some of the answer to that. Now, the most famous verse of this passage, chapter 46, Psalm 46, verse 10, God says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Be still and know that I am God. Maybe the reason I don't know of his presence, which is promised in the passage, is because of the lack of my stillness. Now, I remember when I was a kid, we used to play a variety of games in the backyard. One of them, of course, was cops and robbers. And if you were a cop and you'd catch a robber, you'd point your fake pistol at the robber and say, freeze, drop your weapon, right? I sense that that's a little bit of what's going on here in this passage, because the verse 9 talks about the bow, the spear, the shields. The old translations have chariots. And in the context of war and battle, God is saying, freeze. Drop your weapon. Surrender. I will be your victory. If you would just be still. If you would lay down your arms, you would remember me, and you would find that I am indeed present with you. What an important message as we think about these days and all of the activity and all the hustle to try to get all the classes to the virtual learning environment, and for students to understand how to do that in that new context. Maybe in our battles, we need to remember God's with us, and maybe the way to remember that is to surrender, to simply drop our weapons, to freeze, and know that God is our victorious one. This passage has three words that you will be familiar to you, Crown students. 3 times in this passage there is a Selah. That is a pause, often understood to be a musical term for a rest in the music. Maybe that's what we need in this season, is to take some time for a pause, to still ourselves long enough to know that our God is indeed with us. Thank you for watching. We look forward to being with you. Know that we have a host of resources available to you. We're coming to you with a lot of different activities to maintain our community. Know that we love you and we're praying for you. We're wishing God's best for you. Press on, friend, to the very end. We're cheering you on. God bless you.